The knife she carried to Paris was purchased with deliberate care, a simple kitchen blade with a black handle, 6 inches long. As Charlotte Corday wrapped it in paper and tucked it into her dress, she imagined how it would feel slicing through the flesh of the man she had never met, but had decided must die. The year was 1793, and in her mind, one death could save thousands. She was wrong about that, but then, martyrs often are. History remembers her as the Angel of Assassination, a title that captures both the strange beauty contemporaries noted in her face and the terrible purpose that drove her to murder. Marie-Anne Charlotte de Corday d'Armont was born into nobility in 1768, in an age when such birth still meant something. By the time she died, at 24, beneath the blade of the guillotine, that world had already crumbled into dust and blood. The psychological architecture of Charlotte Corday's decision to kill Jean-Paul Marat was built in the silent halls of the Abbaye aux Dames, where she spent her adolescence after her mother's death. There, among the whispers of nuns and the rustle of pages in the library, she absorbed the philosophical ideals of the Enlightenment. Plutarch and Rousseau became her companions, teaching her about virtue, sacrifice, and the nobility of dying for a cause. The French Revolution found in Charlotte a passionate supporter at first. She embraced its ideals of liberty and constitutional monarchy, seeing in them the rational philosophy she had studied come to life. But as the revolution devoured its children, as the terror painted the streets of Paris red, her fervor turned to horror. From her home in Cayenne, she watched as the moderate Girondins she supported were pushed aside by the radical Jacobins. Jean-Paul Marat became, in her mind, the embodiment of all that had gone wrong with the revolution. His newspaper, L'Ami du Peuple, called daily for more executions, more purges, more blood to feed the hungry guillotine. Charlotte began to see him as a disease himself, infecting the body of France with the fever of violence. The psychological transformation from aristocratic young woman to assassin was neither sudden nor simple. Letters from this period reveal a mind grappling with questions of morality and necessity. She wrote of sacrifice and duty, of the need for someone to act. Her plan was formed with methodical precision that belied her lack of experience in violence. She obtained false papers, arranged meetings with Girondist deputies to establish her revolutionary credentials, and carefully planned her approach to Marat's residence. The knife was chosen for its practicality, silent, reliable, intimate. She would later say she wanted to look into his eyes as he died. Paris, in July 1793, was a city devouring itself. The air was thick with the smell of fear and the sounds of the mob. Charlotte arrived on July 11th, checking into the Hôtel de la Providence. She spent her first day writing a justification for the act she had not yet committed, an address to the French people that explained her motives with chilling clarity. The psychological state of a person preparing for murder and martyrdom is difficult to fathom. Charlotte showed remarkable calm in the days before the assassination. She bought the knife, visited the Palais Royal Gardens, and even had her portrait painted. The artist would later recall her serene expression, noting nothing that hinted at her intentions. This composure would later be seen as either evidence of sociopathy or of absolute conviction in the righteousness of her cause. On July 13th, she went to Marat's residence twice. The first time, she was turned away. The second time, she gained entry by claiming to have information about Girondist activities in Caen. Marat, ever hungry for names to add to his lists of the condemned, admitted her to his presence. He sat in his medicinal bath, a board across it serving as his desk, when she entered. The details of the murder itself are both mundane and mythic. The knife pierced his chest just below the collarbone, severing an artery. He had time only for one cry. "À moi, ma chère amie," Help me, my dear friend." The bathwater turned red with his blood. Charlotte made no attempt to escape, standing calmly by as Marat's mistress and others rushed in. When they found her, she was still holding the bloody knife. The psychological aftermath of the assassination revealed much about both Charlotte and the revolution she hoped to stop. In custody, she remained remarkably composed, answering questions with a clarity that unnerved her interrogators. She expressed no remorse, declaring, "I killed one man to save 100,000. Her calm demeanor led some to question her sanity, but she insisted, "Those who take me for a madwoman will be greatly disappointed when they see how I die." Her trial became a sensation that gripped Paris. She appeared before the Revolutionary Tribunal dressed in white, her hair arranged carefully under her cap. When asked who had inspired her act, she replied, "I needed no one's inspiration. My own hatred was enough." The trial lasted a single day. The verdict was never in doubt. The procession to the guillotine on July 17, 1793, drew enormous crowds. Charlotte wore the red chemise of condemned murderers, but witnesses noted that she looked more like a bride going to her wedding than a criminal to her death. She refused the services of a priest, declaring that she had no need of confession. At the scaffold, she bowed slightly to the people before allowing the executioner to arrange her on the plank. The psychological impact of her action rippled through French society. Rather than stemming the terror as she had hoped, Marat's assassination intensified it. Charlotte's act, intended to save lives, arguably cost many more than it could have saved. Her death became the subject of paintings, poems, and political tracts. The executioner claimed that after the blade fell, he lifted her severed head and slapped it, causing her cheeks to flush with posthumous indignation, a detail that, whether true or not, captured the public imagination. Even in death, she remained an object of fascination, her beauty and youth contrasting sharply with the violence of her act. The psychological analysis of Charlotte Corday continues to challenge historians and psychologists. Was she a political idealist driven to extremes by conscience, or a disturbed young woman who found in political assassination an outlet for deeper psychological needs? Her writings suggest a complex mixture of rational planning and romantic self-dramatization, of political conviction and personal fantasy. The historical context of her action remains crucial to understanding it. The French Revolution had created a new language of political virtue and sacrifice, one that Charlotte had absorbed through her reading and through the heated political discussions of her time. She saw herself as acting out a classical drama of tyrannicide, casting herself as a modern Brutus, striking down a new Caesar. The psychological legacy of Charlotte Corday extends beyond her immediate historical context. She became a template for a particular kind of political violence, the idealistic assassin who kills not for personal gain, but for a perceived greater good. Her story raises uncomfortable questions about the relationship between conviction and fanaticism, between political idealism and murder. Her death marked not an end, but a beginning of a myth, of a martyr cult, of a debate about political violence that continues to this day. The terror she hoped to stop would rage on for another year, claiming thousands more victims before consuming even its own architects. Marat's death accomplished nothing she had hoped for, yet her act remains a powerful symbol of individual conviction, facing overwhelming forces. In the end, Charlotte Corday achieved a kind of immortality, though not the kind she sought. She wanted to be remembered as France's savior. Instead, she became its eternal question mark, a figure whose motivation and meaning shift with each generation that encounters her story. Her last words were addressed to her executioner. "I fulfilled my task, but many others will follow." Today, in the Musée Lambinet in Versailles, visitors can see the small knife with the black handle, preserved behind glass. It seems too modest an object to have changed the course of history, too ordinary to have ended two lives, Marat's through its blade, Charlotte's through its use. Yet in its very simplicity lies its power as a reminder that the greatest historical moments often turn on the smallest of pivots. And somewhere in the collective memory of France, in the space between ideology and action, between conviction and consequence, Charlotte Corday's ghost still walks the streets of Paris, eternally 24, eternally certain, eternally wrong, while the knife in her hand gleams, with possibilities that never died, even after. The blade fell,